In January of this year, someone released an article saying that the manga series Demon Slayer has alone sold more than the entire American comic book market. Now, whether this is true or not is somewhat immaterial, but the overall point that it's trying to make stands. Manga is hot, comics are not. And yes, before I go any deeper, I will acknowledge that Europe has its own comic market, but that's really not what we're here to talk about today, since it doesn't really meet at this particular cross-section of the popular culture that I'm really trying to make a commentary on. And speaking of, there have already been a good number of people to discuss the comics versus manga debacle, and they go into many salient and correct points. But the point that I'm going to be raising today is a little bit different than some of the more politically charged motives that some other commentators have brought up. Specifically, I want to talk about singularity of authorship. By that I mean, how many writers has My Hero Academia ever had? Well, just the one. How many writers has Spider-Man had? Well, I did a Google search for it and I can't find an answer, but short version is, it's kind of a lot. So what does this mean from a storytelling perspective anyway? Well, in My Hero Academia, Midoriya, or Deku, has one story, seen start to finish, with a clear goal that's envisioned by the first and sole author, and he's able to do with it whatever he wants. This allows for long-form storytelling with complex development and natural plot progression that goes at the pace the sole writer's discretion. And that allows them to tell the story that they really want to tell. Spider-Man does not have this luxury. American comics rely extensively on retcons, excuses, and reboots in order to tell whatever story that author's in the particular mood to tell. And this can also include entire arcs that span years and years on end that are just allowed to run because that particular writer has been given authorship for that particular title. So, how does this impact storytelling? Well, let me give you an example. My favorite Green Lantern stories were done by Jeff Johns, particularly Blackest Night, which is the first time I think a zombie or undead story was told particularly well in a superhero setting. But there have been many writers before and after him. Some have done a better job, some have done a worse job. So when you say that you like a character like Green Lantern, who are you complimenting? Are you complimenting the character as a concept? Are you complimenting the original writer who created the concept, just that one in particular, or just that particular reboot's iteration from that particular author? Is there even a way of knowing? Meanwhile, if I say that I like One Punch Man, what I mean is that I like One Punch Man. There's only ever been one writer, and in the case of the manga adaptation, one artist, who's worked on the story consistently from start to finish. There are some rare instances in the manga industry where there are more than one writer, but that's not really the norm, and that's usually done under extremely rare circumstances and oftentimes under the supervision of the original artist. We can actually go one step further with this concept, because when a manga gets an anime adaptation, a lot of the time, a lot of stuff is run by the original author for verification and sign-off. And a lot of the time, they'll do their best to make it a one-for-one of the original source material. Now, filler episodes are a bit of a different story, but that's what happens when you have a serialized manga being adapted into a weekly anime. You just run into those issues with a time slot. This difference causes a great divide in the way media is handled between manga and comic industries. When a comic book is doing poorly, it will oftentimes just get rebooted and then hot potatoed to some other writer. We've seen this happen repeatedly. Firing the incompetents here in the West leads to Twitter mobs and backlash, and Western corporations deeply fear this, likely more than they should. But this is, in some part, due to the fact that the two big comic publishers here in the United States are bureaucracy-laden hellholes, owned by two very large media conglomerations, Warner Brothers and Disney. Ergo, firing someone is pretty much impossible, or at the very least, very close to it. Let's contrast that against Shonen Jump. Shonen Jump is a weekly magazine where a lot of manga get their start. Things like Bleach, Dragon Ball, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure being some among them. In this case, only your sales will matter. If you don't sell well, you get axed. That's all there is to it. And with Singularity of Authorship comes sole responsibility for authorship, meaning that many manga artists and writers have full-time schedules that look like something out of my own personal hell, if I must be quite honest. Author of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Hirohiko Araki, talks about this in brief in his book, Manga in Theory and Practice. So we see here the meeting of two very different ideologies on how this publishing process is ultimately going to work. And more than that, well, there's no way to avoid it. Let's talk about politics for a split second, and why I don't particularly like having them crammed into my escapism. Have you ever seen those really weird, creepy, and in bad taste ads and, well, frankly, there's no other word for it, propaganda that appeared in Superman comics back in the day with the really racist depictions and really didn't age well material that honestly makes everyone involved kind of look like a bad guy? Yeah, that's what politics in my pop culture looks like. And no matter how much you can claim that, oh, but it's for a good cause. Well, you can say that all you want, but that doesn't change the fact that it's going to age like milk. And the longer it goes, the more cringe it will be in the long run. I'm actually of the mindset that fictional characters and celebrities alike really shouldn't be taking stances on very controversial topics in the first place. It seems like bad form. But more than that, an oversaturation will simply lead to pop culture becoming the same kind of dismal, joyless place that the comment sections on news sites have already become. And I think that over-integration of politics and pop culture is fundamentally unhealthy. This will stifle good storytelling and generate propaganda. And as I've already said, propaganda tends to get worse with time and benefit of hindsight. Now, let me clarify. I'm not saying that stories should never have a point or be rooted in a real-world cause. When Daredevil first debuted, charities that benefited the blind went up enormously. There's a lot of good that can be done in storytelling. This is for the same reason that when the Fonz on Happy Days was shown to have a library card, holders of library cards skyrocketed, statistically speaking. But it would be disingenuous to say that Daredevil's entire point was to advocate for the blind. It wasn't. It was to tell an interesting and compelling story with a hero who had an interesting and compelling tale to tell. His backstory, how he handled himself, and how it impacted him in the present is what made people care. Just making out your opponents to be undesirable or for your worldview to always be 100% right is not compelling world building or storytelling. That's childish fan fiction, and most writers of any particular note have gotten over that by the time they're out of middle school. And let's be honest, the market will sort this problem out. As long as manga continues to tell entertaining stories, people will continue to buy them. Companies will be incentivized to localize and localize properly all these stories because people wish to see them. Marvel and DC better enjoy the diminishing returns of the superhero movie boom while they still can. It's not going to last forever, but the consistent, entertaining storytelling of a singular author telling their own story will. Or, here's a terrifying thought, maybe they can create something new and original. Yeah, there's an idea. If you guys are so convinced that your big political point will do well and that it's a story worth telling, don't piggyback on the work of other writers in order to make that happen. Create your own original ideas and put them out there. If you feel that it has merit, other people might too. I'm being sincere when I say this. I'm not being facetious. If you have a story that you think is worth telling, put pen to paper, draw the picture, type up the manuscript, do what you have to do to get the story told. There is a limitless number of stories to be told, and the best way to tell them is the person who conceptualized them to take them and make them real, make them manifest. Sure, there are people who have taken stuff done by other people and improved upon them, but that's just how the evolution of culture works. Taking those ideas, refining them, much like how My Hero Academia took the ideas present in Western comics and made it into a compelling world entirely unique to its own. That is how you continue to refine the market of ideas. That is how you continue to tell good stories. And that is why the singularity of authorship is, in all likelihood, the most pivotal point upon which all storytelling hinges. Stop rebooting old ideas. Stop stealing other people's characters and works. Quit writing fan fiction and write your fiction. This has been the Hipster Snek, and I hope that I was able to illustrate my point and the passion with which I feel for it. Because really, if you're the creative type, you owe it to yourself to make your creation real and to put it out there. Sure, people will judge it, but that's a good thing. You can learn a lot from those experiences. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave a comment down below and tell me so. If you liked today's episode, be sure to hit the like button. And for more like this every week, be sure to hit the subscribe and bell icons too, so you'll never miss one as they come. There's game reviews, IndieX, Snek Tech, the Tomodachi Bros podcast season 2, and more coming soon. And we'll see you there.